If your well water is contaminated, there's money out there to help fix it. The Wisconsin DNR has $5 million available to help people replace their contaminated well, install treatment, or finance the abandonment of a well that's no longer needed. Marty Nessman is the private water supply section manager with the department. He has all the details on who's eligible and how you can spend the money. Marty says this is the second round of money after a successful grant program a few years ago.
Yes, in 2023 and 2024, the DNR provided over $9 million in ARPA grants, and we're able to help 500 well owners address their contaminated wells, and we're able to provide grants to fill and seal 182 unused wells.
Let's talk about the money that you had sent out, because that took a couple years, right? And it's one of those use it or lose it type of grants. So you were kind of under the gun to make sure that those dollars were allocated.
Yes, we had until the end of 2024 to get grants out to people. We were able to do that. We actually thought we would accept grants through the end of 2024 grant applications, but we actually ended up having enough demand that we stopped accepting applications in May of 2024.
Remind us who's applying.
We were getting applications from people who had contaminated wells, wells that had levels of things like nitrate that were above the drinking water standard. And for nitrate, that's 10 milligrams per liter. And actually, of the well grants that we had, over 360 were for nitrate exceedances.
What were some of the other problems?
Some of the other problems were PFAS, which is pretty popular in the news. We had close to 29 of those. Most of them were lower numbers for other things like manganese, arsenic, naturally occurring metals, things like that.
Is this primarily happening in older homes, older locations with older wells, or are you seeing issues with even new construction?
It can be in any kind of construction, newer construction, older construction. The thing that affects whether or not you have a nitrate issue is typically, is there a source of nitrates, such as a agricultural field that receives fertilizer or manure as a nutrient supplement, or sometimes in areas with a lot of septic fields, the septic fields can pass nitrate down to a well, especially in areas with porous soils like sand soils. Nitrate is pretty mobile in those areas, or if you have shallow fractured bedrock like limestone.
So when you say sandy soils, I think of the Central Sands. I mean, is that primarily where you're seeing the need, or is it other regions of the state? If we had a map of Wisconsin in front of us, where are the hot areas?
A lot of the counties that received grants, one of the highest number of grants was in Portage County, which is the Central Sands. Marathon County, which is kind of adjacent to the Central Sands and also has shallow granite bedrock, which is often connected to the surface. And then Waushara County as well, which is also in the Central Sands.
Any other pockets?
Well, we also had Chippewa County, which isn't exactly Central Sands, but it has some shallower sand geology similar to the Central Sands. And Oneida County had more applications for PFAS, because there's a hot spot of PFAS where the town of Stella in Oneida County received a lot of grants because they have PFAS issues in that area.
I did ask you already who's typically applying, but eligibility obviously comes into play there. Who's eligible to apply?
So anyone that has a contamination that exceeds a drinking water standard is eligible. They have to have a family income that doesn't exceed $100,000 for a prior calendar year. We also have grants for contaminated non-community public water systems, but the business income can't exceed $100,000 for the prior calendar year. We have some flexibility for what the money is used for. We prefer to replace a contaminated water source with the one that doesn't have contamination, but sometimes that's not possible. So we do also, in addition to replacing a well, we can have a grant for treating a well to make it safe to drink.
How do you know your well is contaminated?
Sometimes there is an obvious discoloration to the water or taste or a color change, but not always. The Easiest way to know if your well is contaminated is to take a sample into a laboratory and get it analyzed for things that may be in your area. And for the most part, bacteria nitrate is what we recommend people sample for yearly because those are most common contaminants. Metals or man-made chemicals like PFAS are another thing you could sample for. And some laboratories have what they call kind of a household or a homeowner's package that includes a wide variety of things like bacteria nitrate, metals, and even some of those VOCs. Because
if you could put a percentage on it, how many wells in Wisconsin do you think are contaminated?
So we know from the annual testing results that we see that around 3% of wells are positive for E. coli, which is a fecal bacteria, statewide, and 10% have nitrate that exceeds or meets the 10 milligrams per liter nitrate standard. That's statewide. In any given county, that percentage will be higher based on the geology and the land use. 10% of wells statewide, that applies to 800,000 wells that are out in the landscape. So that's a large number of people who could potentially be drinking water with high nitrate.
Now, I know you have published some success stories of what some of this funding has helped small businesses, community organizations, and households overcome. Walk me through something that's stood out to you in this time with helping people replace or fix their wells.
One is the West Koshkonong Lutheran Church. It's a transient non-community water system in rural Stoughton that has had multiple wells drilled because of nitrate levels that fluctuated between 10 and 20 for almost 20 years. And in late 2023, it went over 20 milligrams per liter. They talked to the DNR, well drillers, water treatment systems, contractors. The most desirable approach, of course, is drilling a new well that goes deeper to make sure the water is coming out of the well at a low level. But that wasn't a good fit for their congregation. We worked with them, and the best option was to install a water treatment system. They worked with a local water treatment company to develop a plan, and they received funding to add water treatment to their existing well. And it was very successful in helping this church get back into compliance because they're a public water system. They no longer have to haul water for events they host. They don't have to post nitrate warnings, placards in the church, and things like that. So that's one story.
How much does digging a well typically cost?
Treatment can be expensive as well, but drilling a new well, I think the average well replacement that we funded in 2023 and 2024 was over $20,000, a little bit over $20,000.
And water treatment, that's another thing that these water grants can help cover. That's also expensive.
Yes. The West Koshkonong Church installed a system that actually cost $30,000, and we were able to cover $16,000 of that. So they still had to spend a little money, but it would have been less certain to drill a new well for that much money or more than it was to install the treatment in that case.
Marty Nessman taking some time with us in studio. He's the private water supply section manager with the Wisconsin DNR, and he's got all the details on the ARPA Well Compensation Grant Program through the state. If you're interested, want more information, or want to apply, just visit the Wisconsin DNR website. For the Midwest Farm Report, I'm Stephanie Hoff.